Hello, everyone. My name is Dali Wang. I'm from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Today, I'm going to represent this talk with my colleague, Peter Schwartz. My background is basically doing high-performance computing, AI, and its application to the climate modeling and additive manufacturing. Peters is working on primary software engineering and also working on the climate modeling. The talk today is going to focus on developing the ultra high resolution E3SM land model on Sonnet using primarily OpenACC. My talk is I'm going to have several slides talking about the background of our project and then the reason why we need porting the code into the Sonnet GPUs. The project is supported by Department of Energy. And the project itself is called Energy Exascale Earth System Model. That was designed as a fully coupled Earth system model to simulate the climate change and also the carbon feedback of these climate changes and what is impact to the society, to the nations. And it's one of the flagship projects funded by Department of Energy. And another good features of this Earth system model is it is designed to use advanced computing infrastructure inside the DOE's lab. The project I'm heavily involved one of the components inside the E3SM is called a land model. Instead of doing all the fully coupled simulation, the whole system is around like 2.5 million lines of code. And then the code we're heavily re-engineering porting right now is roughly like 1.5 million lines of code. We're simulating the hydrology and about geophysics and ecosystem dynamics of this Earth system. The reason for us we'll focus on these things is we want to use the supercomputers to do very high ultra high resolution simulation, land simulation. Give a general idea how big from a computational perspective, so how big this simulation compared to the current state of art high resolution land simulation is that. The current simulation we're using is roughly like 50 kilometers by 50 kilometers resolution around the globe. Now we call it around like 0.1 million lines of grid cell. You can think about it is the small land unit. But the things we're trying to do is called the ultra high resolution at 1 kilometer by 1 kilometers. So even for a small region we call the North American region, it's going to use over like 24 million lines, 24 million grid cells. So that's 240 times larger. And that definitely require kind of high-end computers with the GPUs. From that perspective, I want to talk a little bit about the computational characteristics of our model. There were basically three types of things we want to start so people have a general idea why we're choosing this approach for porting. The uELM, number three features. One is each grid cell simulations can be independent. That's very good things for us. And but the other two bad things for us is there's very they use extensive use of global variables, so we have to take care of that things. And the third part is all the simulation has around like 1,000 subroutines, major subroutines. None of them are very highly computational intensive. That means we have to push all of that into the GPUs instead of the focus on partial code. The method we're using is actually developed by ourselves. We're developing a function unit testing framework, and then we're trying to put a code inside function unit framework, and then first on the CPU, and then offload that on the GPU. So the platform we're using, as I mentioned, is the Sonnet. So each Sonnet node have basically 22 cores, IBM Power 9, and 6 GPUs. And because we're using OpenACC, and we are very kind of picky on the specific compilers, and also we're using OpenMPI. As I mentioned, this slide is talking about the data structures and the computational model. The data structure, as I mentioned before, is a nested data structure. We have a different level of gray cells, the topography, and land covers, soil, vegetations. Everything was nested together. So when we parallel our code, we have to be more careful. Then this slide we're talking about is the computational model. We're trying to build this model inside the current E3SM framework. And the two things I want to point out is the node, the communication between the nodes, we're still using OpenMPI. Onside each MPI processes, we pushed all the computing into the GPUs using OpenACC, using both the data regions and also the computer regions inside that. This slide basically show what this kind of how many components inside these ELMs. We are dealing basically the canopy fluxes, radiation dust, that's roughly there was 22 around 20 we call the ELM process functions. And you can see all of them are kind of connected, but also I want to point out is this is only the function calls, but they are all connected through the global variables. Not basically is one of the key challenges we have to deal with. Okay, this slide is talking about the general approaches, how we deal with this gigantic code, scientific code. Basically, what we're trying to do here is we first using the code instrumentation, basically mark this, each functions we want to port it, and then we insert code to capture all the input parameters and output parameters from target functions. And then we save this kind of input out and also save this output out. And then from there, we're developing, we call the function unit testing framework. We create kind of a unit testing driver. For each driver, we have basically two functions. One function is initialize the kind of input global variables. They can read this kind of input and launch the target function, and then push the output. And then the output has to be compared with the original output to make the bit for bit comparison. This is on the host for the GPU version. So basically what we're trying to do is after the initialization, we get this kind of input parameter loaded from disk. We deep copy them into the device, and then we launch and coordinate this kind of computing regions, and then push the output, and then move the output into the host, and then create another copy of output, and then we also do the bit for bit comparison. So that's the general approaches we did for this kind of thing. So for pretty much all the subroutines, we do this kind of first in the kind of we call automatic fashion way. And in order to make these things more kind of automatic, so we create kind of software tools we call the SPEL. And then they help us basically do some pre-porting software analysis and help us set up the reference simulation and primarily handle the function parameters and manage the function parameters. And then we can create a standalone function unit test module. And then after that, we using basically routine and parallel do loop at a very high level. We call those a grid cell level, and make this GPU ready function unit. And then from there, we're looking to which subroutine needs to be further optimization, and then looking into the performance of the memory footprint, and looking to the further performance tuning. So this slide gives you a general idea what is the current status of our effort. So here is basically all kind of subroutines group. We kind of map them together, looking based on the how to say the sequential execution flow. So there were, when you look into there were some subroutines we can easily just get speed up. Also, before that, I would mention that because we are trying to compare the comparison between the GPU and the CPUs, so we're using the node level comparison. We basically push a bunch of 36,000 grid cells into all the CPUs, and then for each core of CPUs, roughly like 840 grid cells. We push the same amount of under the GPUs. So each GPU roughly take like 6,000 grid cells. So we do this kind of calculation, timing them together. So this is roughly, the good things is when we look here, probably like, I would say, even half of them kind of automatic. We say, okay, the good meet our target, so we can move on. There are some things starting with very bad is, for example, ecosystem dynamic non-leaching. So after we using just the routine and parallel do loop on top of it, it's very slow. So it takes almost 7 seconds. So that's is slow, but the good news is it's become standalone, so we can just look into part of it and optimize it much easily. Because the whole thing, to compare the whole thing, roughly take like 15 to 20 minutes. And then the standalone model roughly take 2 seconds. So that's a very good thing for us to do. So we do these things basically one-on-one things to hammer down. So we shrink this first one to from 7 seconds to 66 milliseconds. So another one is liquid temperatures. We reduce it from 2 seconds to 14 milliseconds. I'm going to talk more about the details of how to do these kind of things in manually or just advanced optimization. But before that, we give you a general idea how many memories has been used for data and how many memory was used for kernel. For our case, we roughly get every 1,000 grid cells take like 2 gigabytes of data or 2 gigabytes of memory. And for the old GPU kernels, roughly take like 1.8 gigabytes. So that means when we're using these things, we can push all the GPUs and 6,000 grid cell of data into the GPU memory, and the GPU kernel just resident in there, and we can reuse at each time steps. For the interest of this presentation, what I'm trying to do is get into kind of a technical details, how we speed up the things. We use the ecosystem dynamics as a kind of example. So this contain roughly like 90 plus subroutines. using like roughly 2,000 global variables. And then what we did, we have basically four type of things. The first things is reduce the memory because when the code was original design, they're using the CPU, they didn't care about that memory usage. But when we're talking about the GPU, is thinking about, we have been very, very careful about that. And then we basically did a dramatic things to understand how to reduce the CPU footprint. We reduced the things from 2.1 gigabytes to all the way to the 300 megabytes. And then the improvement was dramatic. So the reason for that is the GPU allocation and on the memory allocation on GPU is very, very expensive. And also we restructured parallel do loop. We basically flattening the do loop, not only on the grid cell level, but basically break it and make it more kind of deeper and not more deeper, more flat. So for each grid cell, they have a column, and for each column, there's many patch level things. We basically do this kind of a patch level, summarize all the patch level parallelism and make it kind of and push them, all of them, into the GPU at the same time. So, and also another thing is for the inner loops, we're using reduction and atomic options. And third one is basically is more specific for our case, is we have to do the nitrogen cycle, phosphor cycle, and the carbon cycle. So that the three components can also be parallelized using the OpenACC. So the performance, as I say, we roughly achieved like 3 times faster compared to the original CPU code. And these slides also show the kind of how to say weak scalability. So when we increase the number of grid cells, how this execution time changes. So this is showing the paper just published recently. And the conclusions, I think one of the major contributions for this work is we provide a generic approaches to how to develop GPU ready uELM code using OpenACC, but it is within the function unit testing framework. And one of the things we are very satisfied with OpenACC is to provide a very robust method for accelerating the uELM modules, even we using the subroutine and parallel do loop at the very, very beginning. Let's say about, yeah, I can say more than half of the code already optimized. And they applied several techniques to improve our model performance. We summarized the 4 or 5 of them. I think that can be applied to all the other code. And we also want to highlight that reduce memory footprint play big role in our optimization, in our porting effort. We are glad to see that after first time step, all the code, all the kernels are resident in the GPU, and then we can just reuse it seamlessly. This slide is basically talking about our kind of references. There were several references talking about what is the function unit test platform, and there's one paper talking about the kind of the technical details on how we optimize the ecosystem dynamics model on GPUs. And then there's another paper I think we will ready to submit to the WACCPD program just in a couple of days. not talking about how we design software tools for the uELM porting. So that's the end of our presentation. Of course, this research was supported by Department of Energy, and we use OLCF Summit computers.